YouTube, Dawson Ryder here. Welcome to my review for Red Ranger Becomes an Adventurer in Another World, episodes 5 and 6. I missed last week's review, so I decided to double them up. Because this series is kind of a specific interest for like a smaller audience, who knows, maybe the videos will find more of an audience later. I might double up sometimes, not all the time, I'll just kind of go with the flow. Like if there's an episode where really big stuff happens, like the 6th Ranger shows up and gives all the magical characters powers, I'm probably going to want to talk about that. But sometimes it's better to just talk about them back to back, kind of like with these. Because oddly enough, even though 4 was more eventful, I actually had more notes for 5. I mean, 5 was more eventful, I had more notes for 6. But let's go ahead and talk about it. So 5 picked up where we left off from 4. 4 actually does come into play with this, where after they defeated the enemy, it kind of grows big. And they oddly enough do comment on that. Red says, yeah, this is par for the course. The enemy always grows big at the end. I really like that. Again, continue to love the Sentai references in this world. And it was cool to see that just because like in this world, they're probably not used to that when they vanquish. Also, the word vanquish has been ruined by the Charm series for me. Like I didn't fully watch it, but I've seen reruns, and every time I hear the word vanquish, they say the words vanquished and innocent on that show so much. That was a side tangent. Anyway. Usually when they vanquish a character in this world, it's just done. Of course for Red though, you know, it grows big all the time. So I thought that was fun, and then they form the Megazord and go to space and destroy it. And it kind of made me almost wish this was the first time they used the Megazord, just because of the context of, like, oh yeah, the enemy always grows big. But I'm glad it wasn't, just because there has been some legitimately funny bits. I think my favorite being, of course, when he got stuck in the cave, and also when he busted it out in his fight with Logi and just swatted him away. After they sacrifice him, what is this, Yu-Gi-Oh? After they sacrifice him, I said it again. After they defeat him, you have Keltina healing the seed with her wolf. She has like a special magical wolf, the goodest boy. Really cool design, and she explains how that works and how it can heal. However, it takes a lot out of her. And then not long after that, they're then attacked by this demon overlord guy. Like the world demon or something like that, and he took responsibility for creating the demon seeds and stuff, and he starts fighting against our characters. And probably most notably, 2 things happened. One was when Logi kind of tried to sacrifice himself for Red. Obviously, he survived. But it was kind of cliche, like we've been playing off these cliches of characters forming bonds quickly. But he was like, why did you save me? And he's like, you know why. And it flashes back to their previous episode with their little bit of a bond and him feeling guilty about taking his powers away. And it was meant to be, I think, a sweet moment, but it just kind of reminded me almost of a parody aspect, which maybe that's what they were going for. But the idea of they haven't liked each other this whole time, and there's only been a very brief moment, and that's enough for him to sacrifice himself. Yet again, reminding me of RDC World's videos parodying that. The other moment was, though, when Red was arguing with this world demon guy about bonds, about good bonds and bad bonds, James bonds, and all the things that bonds can do for you. And it causes him to get all worked up, and he's like seething with this dark energy. And it made me really curious, like, is this a thing that always happens to him? Like, is this a story arc in his Sentai world? Or is this something that's happening because he's in a magic world? I don't know. Regardless, I found it fascinating, and it also gave me, like, dark Tokyo Ichigo vibes. Ultimately, they're saved by who I thought was the Sorcerer Supreme person that stole the job of Yidra's dad, but it's actually her daughter. But she does save the day from them, and then she also takes Teltina back to heal, and that's where we pick up then with episode 6. And oddly enough, like this episode here I was just talking about is more action-packed. Episode 6 is much more of a cool down where we're kind of resting with the characters as Teltina is literally resting, but I found more interesting stuff to comment on. Like you have Yidra arguing with, I keep calling him the Sorcerer Supreme, I keep forgetting what the name of the title is called, but that's what I'm going to call it. But she's arguing with her daughter about the difference in regulations, about how her dad was more free-form about it and allowing people to use magic, and they're more strict about like regulating magic and stuff kind of like weapons and drugs and stuff like that. It almost felt like a Sokovia Accords conversation in a way. Maybe just Captain America stuff is on my mind. But it was an interesting little back and forth, and it leads to this moment where Red says like, yeah, your dream can be hard to achieve, and she like misinterprets it and runs off. And then they have this moment of like, no, it's hard to achieve. It doesn't mean I don't believe in you and want to see it, but it's just hard to achieve. It's a very classic kind of, you know, bonding moment, which we'll get more bonding moments later, as we'll see. And then on the way back, one of my favorite moments was when he says like, you know, both of you kind of have your points, and I think it's valuable maybe for you two to come together like we will later. Thank you. It's valuable for them to sort of see things from each other's perspective, which I found really refreshing because this series is basing all this stuff off of Toku, especially with a character like Red, who is very much cut from the cloth of a classic Sentai and Rider protagonist. And one of the things I voiced my frustrations with in Sentai and Rider, most notably Rider because you have so many different like adversarial characters coming in, that the series message is always the main character is always right. There are no other valid points of view except the main character. So it was refreshing to see a character like that actually say, hey, maybe you're both right. My favorite example of this is X-Aid, where X-Aid's point of view was we need to get to know the patients to heal them, and then Brave was like, no, this is like, time is of the essence, we need to heal this fast. Both approaches have value, because obviously there are times where you really need to know the whole case to heal somebody, but there might be times where literally time is of the essence, someone might die. And I thought, because that was especially very medical focused, I'm like, that's where you should meet in the middle. And it was like, nope, sorry, it's the cult of the main character. So I thought that was really refreshing, just speaking on like Toku tropes, that we had a main character like that where it's usually worship the POV of the main character. It was actually, hey, listen to each other. And she does bring stuff to her at the end. She almost kind of shuts her down, but still, I thought that was nice. And then when we get back, there is like a scene where she's in the bath trying to figure out this stone, and it's like a weird, they play with time a little bit in a weird way, where like he then tub teleports to her, and it does that thing where it says, very bad, like the last time they were in the hot spring, which is a funny bit. And then it flashes back to like when that happened a few seconds ago, except it wasn't clear. It seemed like he had that scene with her in the bath and then went out and talked to Logi. But what ends up happening is they backpedal, and he has this nice moment with Logi, and then he gets teleported there, and I thought it was because of the stone, although it did glow. But it's because of this like bond thing his morpher has, and that was something else that I really liked that both of these episodes did, is they continue to flash back to fake Sentai episodes. In episode 5, it was about keeping secrets, like secret identities, which was funny. The other one was about bonds, when he was arguing with the villain about bonds, and it shows like, oh, even the villains have bonds, and that very much reminded me of Team Rocket, almost like currently in Boom Boom, but post-currently, like a few days ago. But anyway, for this one, they used a flashback of their like mentor scientist guy explaining the powers to them about how they used bond energy. I liked this too because it kind of had like Sentai logic value in the sense that there's this literal energy between the connections between people. And this is maybe, this might sound ridiculous, but the most scientific and logical way I've seen them explain the illogical way things will often happen in Toku, where they like will power into existence, or like our powers come from Earth's smile and protect smiles. And it's always really cheesy and not always annoying, but sometimes annoying when they come up with a really interesting mythology and then it's explained away with literal nonsense. But this is kind of like giving a logic to the nonsense, where it's still kind of nonsense, but it kind of made sense more than a lot of those silly explanations given. So I really like that. But it basically explains when there's a strong enough connections between the people, if one of them needs each other, they'll teleport to each other. And obviously it reminded me of mmpr teleporting, but it also reminded me of Dawn Brothers, when other characters would be in the middle of something and they get teleported right there. But that's why he was teleported to her. And interestingly, then they have a conversation about the connections. Like, obviously, there's a connection between the two of them, with another bigger connection between the two of them about to happen. Thank you. But they bring up the connections between the two of them and how maybe there's a connection between the two worlds, which I think is really interesting, and I'm interested to see how that plays out. But then they talk about researching the connection between the two of them, and it's implied that they had sex. And here's the thing. I mean, they did have sex. But here's the thing. I never thought I'd be talking about two characters having sex on the Toku Review channel, especially with PR, because if they hold hands, they have to both have to go to confessional. Anyway, here's the thing about this storyline. Probably my least favorite thing in the show is the romance between these characters. Not because I don't like them together or anything, or like it's hard to see on screen. It's just I don't feel the chemistry between them, in the sense that most of their connection and the scenes building up to this revolved around fan servicey moments, which isn't really my thing, to be honest. I just never understood being attracted to a cartoon. It's not a real person, so I don't know. But that's not my thing. But I feel like most of their moments have been just them blushing around each other when she's quasi-naked or naked for some reason. And it almost feels one-sided, which obviously it isn't. But it feels one-sided because I feel in all their scenes, she's nervous because she likes him, but it feels like he's just nervous because she's naked. Like, he'll just suddenly show up or be talking to her, and she'll be, like, in a state of undress, and he's just nervous. It almost feels like Goku in a way. But it just felt weird. I don't know. I'm not saying it's fully one-sided, but all the other build-up in regards to their bond is just simply about him believing in her and him and her appreciating that. But that sort of connection, especially in that earlier scene, feels like the type of connection we've seen in many other connections that didn't even feel romantic. So, I don't know. It's not my thing. With all that being said, the entire storyline and this whole sequence was worth it for them then discussing their relations by having the belt voice, the changer voice, say like, Bond Gattai. I don't remember what the word for bond is in Japanese that they were saying, but every time they would say sex or whatever, they would say Bond Gattai, however they would say it. That was honestly so hilarious. It reminded me of a bit straight out of Akiba Ranger. The last sequence then is them meeting with the Sorcerer Supreme guy, and they're like, okay, you don't need to be helping anymore because we got this because we're the royal peoples or whatever. But then she's like, no, you don't understand. I has doggo. And he's like, good point, good point. So they let him go out and have adventures. However, this one guy who clearly doesn't have nefarious goals because his face doesn't in any way look like an evil villain, then suggests that instead of destroying the seeds when they find these people, that they're going to weaponize them. So that's going to go totally right. Nothing go wrong with that. But basically that's where it ends, outside of what I talked about earlier with Yidra bringing her ideas to the daughter. It ends with them being granted permission to continue their quest to save people from the evil seeds, but they now have to bring them in alive so that they can weaponize them. So yeah, I really enjoyed these 2 episodes. My favorite thing is still like just the Sentai references and tropes tying into everything, like I said, kind of talking about the bonds was really cool with that. Also Red, like I said, Red, like I said, I'm a poet and I didn't even know I rhymed those words. But Red, like I said, actually having a nice point of view for a Toku main character of like, hey, maybe listen to each other instead of being like, let's all form a cult around the main character. Anyways, guys, until next time, like I said, I might do these 1 at a time or 2 at a time depending on the week, but I still will keep covering the show because I'm enjoying talking about it. But sound off your thoughts on these episodes in the comments. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell to get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.